Halina po't pakinggan ang isa pa nating kapatid na narrator na si Aling Maria, nagtatampok ng mga kwentong halaw sa malawak na imahinasyon. Nasa description box po ang link sa kanyang channel. Please subscribe. Salamat po.
The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you.
According to Oxford Languages, reincarnation is a noun that means the rebirth of a soul in a new body or a new version of something from the past. There have been several accounts in history that seem to prove that reincarnation does happen. Let us explore the story of the Pollock Sisters. The Pollocks were an English family. John Pollock, who was born in Bristol in 1920 and raised in the Church of England before converting to Catholicism. Florence Pollock grew up as a member of the Salvation Army and converted to Catholicism after marrying John. The Pollocks left the church in the 1960s. At the time of the twins' birth, John believed strongly in reincarnation, but Florence did not. Joanna Pollock, their first daughter and third child overall, was born in 1946. Jacqueline, their second daughter, was born in 1951 and had a birthmark on her left wrist. Both daughters spent a lot of time with their grandma because their parents, John and Florence Pollock, were terribly busy with their delivery business. As a result, the girls developed a strong friendship. Joanna enjoyed taking care of Jacqueline and behaving as a mother hen. Jacqueline enjoyed role-playing games and dressing up in costumes. Joanna allegedly warned her father that she would never be a lady, a terrible foreshadowing of what was to follow. In 1954, Jacqueline acquired a laceration over her right eye after a fall when she was just 3 years old. This formed a permanent scar that was slightly depressed and was especially visible in cold weather. Jacqueline also had a roundish dark birthmark on the left side of her wrist. On May 7, 1957, 11 years old Joanna, 6 years old Jacqueline were walking to church with a 9-year-old boy named Anthony when they were hit by a suicidal driver who had taken aspirin and phenobarbital in near-lethal dosages. The driver, who was devastated over the removal of her own children from her care, evidently hit the 3 youngsters on purpose in a misguided attempt at vengeance. Joanna and Jacqueline both died at the scene. Anthony died en route to the hospital, and the driver survived, taken into custody, and eventually sent to a psychiatric facility. John and Florence Pollock were clearly heartbroken about the loss of both of their daughters in such a horrific manner. In the days following his daughters' deaths, John claimed to have had a vision from God and that he knew Joanna and Jacqueline had been killed in retaliation for John praying for proof of reincarnation. John had read a book about past lives and reincarnation as a child, and the concept had intrigued him ever since. Despite his suspicions that his daughters were taken because he demanded proof of reincarnation, John was confident that the girls would be returned to the family. Florence, on the other hand, was adamantly opposed to this proposal as she attempted to move on from the loss of their daughters. Until Florence became pregnant in the spring of 1958. John was convinced that the pregnancy would result in twin females with the souls of both Joanna and Jacqueline residing in the new kids. Even though the doctor told the couple that it would be a single birth, John was certain that this was the return of the girls. Florence gave birth to twin girls, Gillian and Jennifer, on October 4, 1958. Jennifer has 2 birthmarks, one on her left wrist and one over her eye, the same scars that Jacqueline had. When the twins were 3 years old, they were introduced to some of Joanna's and Jacqueline's toys, which had been stored in the attic for years. To their surprise, the girls were able to identify which items were gifts from Santa and claim ownership of them without arguing. If you have ever had children or been around them, you will know that this is uncommon. Most children desire the toy that they do not have, and arguments occur over who gets what. Gillian claimed Joanna's toys, while Jennifer claimed Jacqueline's toys, all without being instructed, supposedly. Joanna had taken on a motherly and more responsible role towards her younger sister since she was 5 years older. With the twins, the Pollocks noticed a similar dynamic. Gillian was acting more adult and responsible than Jennifer. And Jennifer did not question Gillian's motherly attitude toward her. Joanna enjoyed dressing up and acting in her own made-up plays. Gillian had the same passions. Joanna and Jacqueline liked combing people's hair, especially their fathers. Gillian and Jennifer did too. Jacqueline was still learning to write at the time of her death, and her instructor had advised her parents that something had to be done about the girl holding the pencil upright in her fist. Gillian held the pencil correctly straight away as she and Jennifer began learning to write. Jennifer struggled with it until she was 7 years old. Still, even as a young adult, she reverted to holding the pen upright in her fist very often. Joanna had a slimmer frame than Jacqueline, who was more stocky. Even though they were identical twins, Gillian's slim build was opposite Jennifer's in the same way. Florence also said that the girls frequently discussed their sisters' deaths, saying things like, "Blood's flowing out of your eyes. That's where the automobile collided with you." Gillian also allegedly pointed to Jennifer's birthmark, the one that resembled Jacqueline's scar, and discussed the fall that caused Jacqueline's scar in the first place. Again, allegedly without being told. The girls began chatting about a local park where they used to swing when they visited Hexham, which they had moved away from when the twins were barely a year old. They had never visited the park before. On the way to the park, Gillian and Jennifer wanted to go across the road to the park and swing, clearly showing that they knew the way there. Florence wore a particular smock to help her husband with the milk delivery business when Joanna and Jacqueline were still alive. Jacqueline was still little and home all the time, while Joanna was at school and not present when Florence delivered milk. When the two girls died, Florence stopped helping with the business and the smock was stored away. John put on the smock to do some painting when Gillian and Jennifer were about 5 years old. "Why are you wearing Mommy's coat?" Jennifer asked when she noticed him. John asked how she knew it was Florence's coat. Jennifer explained that it had been worn by her mother when delivering milk. Jennifer was also irritated by Gillian's inability to recognize the smock. Once, Gillian pointed to Jennifer's forehead birthmark and said, "That is the mark Jennifer got when she fell on the bucket." The girls also apparently had some slight form of PTSD related to cars, as they often had extreme reactions to the sound of cars. They often flinched away and screamed that the car was coming to get them. "The blood is coming out of your eyes." Florence noticed Gillian cradling Jennifer's head one day. That's where the car struck you. When their father discovered Joanna and Jacqueline's bodies, he noticed that Jacqueline's head was bandaged above the eyes. After the age of 7, Gillian and Jennifer's past life recollections faded. They seemed to accept that they were Joanna and Jacqueline reincarnated as adults, even though they could not recall any of the stories or coincidences from their childhood, and they expressed mild skepticism about the concept of reincarnation. Then, in 1981, something happened. Gillian saw memories of herself playing in a sandpit in Wickham, the town where Joanna and her family resided when she was about 3 years old. The lawn, the mansion, and the gardens were all perfectly described by Gillian. She had never been to Wickham before. Gillian and Jennifer would have inadvertently learned a lot about their departed sisters, according to skeptics. Joanna and Jacqueline, as well as the sadness over their loss, were still a dominating presence in the Pollock home, even though they were born just over a year after the tragedy. Both maternal and paternal impressions would have had a significant impact on the twins' psychology. For example, the girls' fear of cars could be described as an internalized fear from their parents. It's understandable that Florence would have been preoccupied with thoughts about Joanna and Jacqueline throughout her pregnancy. Their father is an even bigger factor. John Pollock, a devout Catholic, believed in reincarnation and prayed for proof. He believed the death of his daughters was a punishment for praying so much to receive indisputable evidence that reincarnation is real. When Florence got pregnant, he was convinced that this is it, and told her that Joanna and Jacqueline will both reincarnate, even though they were told by their doctor that Florence was only carrying one child. Hey everyone, I just wanted to say that I am incredibly grateful that you took time out of your schedule to listen to my narration. This is Nikki of Twisted Mind, wishing you a great rest of your day. Salamat.